You might have seen some news recently about how football governance in the UK is going to change a lot when it pertains to the Premier League and every professional club. And those rumors appear to be true because the UK government just dropped its white paper on the subject, and the changes coming to the football pyramid the next couple of years are going to be massive in England. So what is this white paper? What does it mean, and how is it going to change football governance in England going forward? Lucy Fraser, the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, actually said this white paper represents the most radical overhaul of football governance since the rules were first invented over a century ago. The rules! We know this because she put it in her ministerial foreword at the beginning of this 99-page white paper, which is open to the public and is available to you in the description if you want to read it as well and suffer a tremendous amount of legalese pain. The chief idea that's being proposed by the government as part of this overhaul of football governance is the introduction of an independent regulator. And its purpose will be to deliver sustainable professional football clubs that are well-run, resilient, and engaged with fans, which is all a bunch of excellent sounding stuff, but what is this? Like, this is an immense regulatory body that will be set up with checks and balances. This white paper makes that clear, but like, what is a white paper in the first place? What does this mean for the Premier League and every club in England? Well, I was asking myself the same question. I had no idea what a white paper was either, so I Googled it. Yeah! They're a way for governments to present policy preferences before they introduce legislation. So laying out the ideas that they want to accomplish with their legislation in the following couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years to test public opinion and get feedback on it. It also casts a wider net for you to get feedback on the impact that this sort of legislation would have if it was passed. This particular white paper that the government wrote up on football, cheerio lads, good show. Well, it was the result of the formation of the Super League 2 years ago. Obviously, the Super League failed before it even got off the ground, but that prompted a survey. This survey was called the Fan-Led Review of Football Governance, and this white paper is the result of that fan-led review of football governance 2 years later. And they explain what the takeaways were essentially in the executive summary here. The free market does not properly account for the importance of clubs to their fans and communities, and industry self-regulation has remained inadequate, seeing clubs collapse and fans harmed. Therefore, football needs a strong center to independently apply reformed rules. Which, given the two professional clubs in England have collapsed over the last couple of years, first Bury and then Macclesfield, that is a pretty fair takeaway. That and the fact that the biggest 6 clubs in England almost bolted the entire English pyramid, which would have a catastrophic impact on sport media and culture. So I think it's something that the government felt it had the right to intervene in and the need to intervene in, based off the fan-led review of football government. It's just such a catchy name. Hey, you! Our editor didn't know what transition to put in this spot, so he's put this here. That subscribe button down there. If you're enjoying this video, go ahead and hit it. If you don't hit it, it'll disappear tomorrow. This is your last chance. The white paper's solution to everybody getting carried away is the introduction of this mighty regulator. But it is a reluctant mechanism. At least that's the way the government is making it sound. They'd prefer for football itself to get its own house in order without the government having to intervene too much. I mean, they use that exact terminology. The government is clear that this should not stop football getting its own house in order. They don't want to get in the way of reform progress that's happening within the game. They just want to make sure that it happens eventually and is going to happen at all. Somebody, please pay somebody. But the regulator is going to do things, and to keep the sport sustainable for British cultural purposes, it has 3 things to keep track of. First, club sustainability. Second, systemic stability. And third, cultural heritage? What in the Bundesliga is going on here? Wow, this Zealand guy is pretty cool. If only he streamed live on Twitch and I could join him. At a link in the description. That'd be sick. And we're gonna get to all 3 of them, but this report is long, so allow me to distill it for you as we start with club sustainability. Now, the way this regulator is going to achieve club sustainability is by implementing a licensing system. This means that every club is gonna have to get a license to operate as a professional club from this regulator, which, for a group of people that don't really want to involve themselves much, is a massive amount of involvement, but it does kind of make sense. In order to gain a license, you have to have appropriate resources. I mean, they made this beautiful little table. I feel like somebody should introduce them to the idea of color somewhere. But the appropriate resources is just having enough money to cover your expenditures and be financially healthy and be able to withstand a shock to the system. Fit and proper custodians means that you have to have an owner that is capable of exercising significant decision-making influence that is fit and proper. Yeah. Whoa! Fan interests are looked out for. This is incredibly vague, and we will talk about it later. And then number 4, approved competitions, which, by the way, Super League's not an approved competition. So if you want a license to operate as a professional club in England, you only can do it in approved competitions that have been approved by the regulator. If you aren't playing in approved competitions that are approved by the regulator, then you aren't going to get a license to operate as a professional club in England. So once this regulator's in place, you can kiss the Super League essentially goodbye, at least a Super League that includes English teams. But the one that might cause the most drama is the fit and proper custodian requirement for licensing, because they have laid out an expansion, a significant expansion to the ownership tests that will be done for club owners. In 7.5 here, they highlighted some things that had been missed in previous ownership tests, like owners with serious criminal convictions. How do you miss that? How? Owners with long histories of prior business bankruptcies, not in the sport, which is what they looked at before, but outside of sport. Owners subsequently imprisoned for offenses, example, money laundering. Again, how do you miss that? Owners who acquire clubs without proof of funds seems important, and offshore hedge funds with unclear ownership, which basically ties into the one before. Do they have the money or do they not have the money? This is obviously all there to guarantee that clubs will be more sustainable and they're not going to get caught up in bankruptcies, guys not having a lot of money, or things just falling apart with bad actors. But what this is stopping short of is the kind of state club ownership or morally questionable club ownership that has been criticized in the past. This human tea kettle named Stuart Andrew is the Minister of Sport, and he said, "Let me be clear, we are not venturing into the area of foreign policy with regard to the regulator." He said that to The Athletic in this article, which is linked in the description along with all of the sources for this video if you want more information once you finish watching. But regardless, this is still something that would make significant progress towards financial health. And another key part of that is Part 2 of the regulator's job. Just a refresher, systemic stability. Now this is a pretty important part for the first job of the regulator too, because there are over 110 professional clubs in England, and the amount of money that trickles down the pyramid and how it trickles down the pyramid will go a long way to making sure their finances are shock resistant, etc., etc. Where the government really talks about football-led solutions when it comes to club sustainability, and then it's all over them anyway, here the government is really much less cavalier about intervening in things. They said a football-led solution to solving distributional issues remains the strongly preferred outcome both now and for the future, and multiple times throughout the report stresses the fact that it will only use its ability to encourage a resolution between the Premier League and the English Football League for, trickle-down distribution as an absolute last resort. They said it remains a very real prospect that a football-led solution will not be reached without external pressure. So they're aware that it's taken the Premier League and EFL a long time to get basically nowhere in negotiations. EFL chairman Rick Perry's been fighting this for a long time, pushing the UK government to intervene, so I guess he's finally gotten his wish. But the Premier League and the EFL still have a very long way to go, so it is entirely possible that when it comes to settling matters like parachute payments and those sorts of things, the government is going to have to intervene. Very, very controversial for the Premier League and for the EFL, depending on which way the arbitration goes. Because it hasn't been fleshed out in the white paper, but this regulator might have the power to just make an offer that they have to accept, oversee a model of binding final offer arbitration. Now, I have a particular proposal. All of the parachute payments go to Zealand. Any questions? Good. Then there's the third part. This is all about the club culture and sporting culture and fan engagement. And all of it, almost all of it, is super vague. But maybe that's good. Maybe that means the regulator will be able to go after all sorts of stuff that technically fits under the rule of law, but as it stands right now, the way it's laid out in the white paper doesn't really lock a ton of things in place. For example, clubs will need to satisfy the regulator that they have appropriate and proportionate provisions for considering the interests of fans on key decisions and issues of club heritage. What does that even mean? Like in practice, what does that mean? What is the amount of involvement that qualifies being eligible for licensing and preserving the heritage of the game? Because now clubs have to consult the fans enough to satisfy the regulator to get their license, and they have to adhere to all heritage rules, which are essentially codifying the fact that you can't move stadiums, can't sell your stadium, you can't change the club badge, you can't change your home colors on the kit, you can't change the club's name, all without fan approval and a fan vote. That's all codified, and that stuff's all great. That's a big win, but the rest of it is, look, there's a lot of pages. It's very amorphous and nondescript. There's no golden ownership rule. There's no, you have to create a board of fans. It's just kind of, talk to them. But that's pretty emblematic of this entire white paper, that most of this stuff is good, but some of it could be misinterpreted, abused, and lead to some of the same problems that we already have. But what is definitely for sure is that this would be a concrete step in the right direction to financial sustainability and pyramid sustainability within the game in England. As for when this is going to happen, a few incredible optimists think that maybe by the beginning of next season, this regulatory body would be set up, but the end date seems to be 2025. The real bones of it is nobody's quite sure. They're going to need to get the feedback and then see how fast they can move on the legislation itself in the House of Commons. And the actual end result is probably just a boatload of annoying paperwork for a lot of professional clubs. So good luck with that. Have fun. Now, if you want to read more about this, all our sources are in the description, including the report. But if you want to continue to just binge watch YouTube videos, good choice, first of all. Here's a video about how Japan went from not making a World Cup in 1990 to legitimately being arguably the best non-power continent team in the world in 30 years. They made a very conscious decision, and it was a good one.